Hi everyone. Welcome to this informative talk organized by the Biocon Biologics and the Week magazine. I'm Dr. Garima Aggarwal. I'm a consultant nephrologist and renal transplant physician myself, and I will be your host today. Now, before we begin, let's talk a little about COVID-19. Since the first cases of COVID-19 were reported from early December in Wuhan, China, it has changed the world as we know it. And while we keep talking about COVID 19 in terms of the number of active cases, the number of deaths, we must not forget all the ancillary damage COVID has caused, especially to the health of people suffering from chronic diseases. And in that is included patients of kidney diseases. Patients of kidney diseases have suffered a lot during this period because of a number of ways, directly or indirectly. Not only because they have a risk of developing severe COVID, but also because of missed treatments, missed hospital visits, missed diagnosis, in many cases, in many parts of the country, missed dialysis, and a complete disruption of transplant services. So, all of us in the nephrology community are pretty clear that the morbidity and mortality of COVID 19 for the kidney disease population extends far beyond what is reported. So, this is the point of us discussing this topic today. While COVID is going on, it doesn't change the existing disease burden that we have in India. According to many estimates, 1 in 10 people suffer from CKD. And India has a large ESRD population that's waiting to be transplanted. By an estimate, a few years ago, it was estimated that around 200,000 people in India require transplantation, around end-stage renal disease, which require transplantation. And while over the years, India has progressed as the second highest number of transplants in the world, we are second only to the United States in our numbers. We are still doing around 8,000 to 9,000 transplants a year. So there is a big divide in the patients wanting to get transplant and the number of transplants that are done. This preceded COVID. On the other hand, there are a lot of reports coming in about kidney transplant patients being at a higher risk of developing severe disease with COVID and mortality or death due to COVID. So what does it really mean for the kidney patient? And I've been asked this by several of my patients, as in, are kidney patients stuck between a rock and a hard place? As in, should they go for transplant? Should they not go for transplant? What are the answers? No, last year we didn't have enough information, but this year we understand the disease better. When you Google or search online for these things, you will only mostly hear of foreign data. There's not that much data we know from Indian centers, but that's what we are changing today. And that's why it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. Our speaker today will be Professor Dr. Deepak S.Ray. Dr. Ray is the head of Department of Nephrology and Renal Transplantation at the Rabindranath Tagore Institute of Cardiac Sciences in Kolkata. And he is certainly a pioneer and a referral unit for all of Eastern India and in fact, the whole of India. Dr. Ray heads one of the largest transplant centers in the country with one of the largest volumes in all of India. He's credited with having successfully completed around 400 transplants since the beginning of COVID. And he has submitted data and has been quoted in various international and national publications where he has shared his data with the world as to how to go about this process during the COVID scare. If you haven't read of his scientific journals, you would have certainly heard of him in the news. Dr. Ray was widely covered last year, a few months ago, for probably being the first center in the world to have done a transplant with a recovered donor and a recovered recipient from COVID-19. Since then, Sir has done many of those cases, and he will be discussing those with us now. It's an honor, Dr. Ray, to welcome you here today. Sir, please we'll be happy if you share your experience with us.
Thank you, Dr. Garima, for your kind words. It has been always a pleasure to work with you, at least digitally. I'll share my slides. Today we are here to talk about the kidney transplantation during the COVID-19 pandemic we are facing. See, in early last year, that's in June 2020, when we are not very sure about the COVID infection, we are actually troubled how to deal with it, how to deal with nephrology patient with COVID infections. There have been certain papers which have described a very high mortality of transplant recipients who had COVID infection. This is a paper from Tango International Transplant Consortium. It was published in June 2020 from USA, Italy, and Spain, 12 centers. They had 9,800 kidney transplant recipients. 144 of them got hospitalized because of COVID infections. The comorbidities were diabetes in half the cases, obesity in half the cases, cardiovascular disease and lung disease in around 20 to 25% of them. In a 52 days follow-up, half the patients had AKI, acute kidney failure. Intubation was done in 30%, mortality was around 30%. The conclusion was, since the mortality is high, around one-third patient died, kidney transplant to be closely monitored because of high mortality. Now let's come to dialysis. This is the dialysis data of our hospital. The gray one is 2019. We do around 4.5 thousand to 5,000 dialysis in a month. This dropped down in 2020. It came down to around 3.5 thousand to 3.4 thousand per month. And gradually towards the end of 2020, when the COVID number came down, it actually started rising. So in January, February of this year, and March, we were doing around 4,500 dialysis. But again, it has started coming down because of the second wave or the last wave of COVID. It is now around 3,800 per month. Let's see the COVID-19 infection in dialysis, in our dialysis population. There is a good paper from Bombay in July 22, and they had COVID infection. The patients who are on dialysis, if they had COVID infection, they had shown a mortality of 38%. That's very, very high. In our hospital also in 2020, we had average around 400 patients on maintenance dialysis. And the COVID-19 infection happened in 45, that is around 11%. And death due to COVID was 17 out of 45. That is 4% of the total dialysis population, but 37% of the population who had COVID infection. So that's very high. Around one-third patient died because of the COVID infection. Amongst all the COVID infected patients on dialysis. In 2021, this is still worse. We had a very large number of COVID infection in, especially in May and June post, the famous West Bengal election. So considering that average number of patients around 420 who are on dialysis, we had 69 COVID infection. So that's around 16%. And half of 69, actually little more than the half of them actually died because of severe COVID infection. So considering this, that mortality is so high in dialysis, we thought we should be doing transplant because transplant mortality is relatively less. This is a paper which has been published from India in the reputed journal, The Transplantation. 13 centers were involved in the observational study, including ours. We are a large contributor. There are 250 transplant patients who had COVID infection. The median age was for 43 years. 32% had diabetes. Mostly people had mild to asymptomatic infection, and 14% had severe and 20% moderate infection. 50 of 250 patients were treated at home and 200 got hospitalized. the death rate was 11.6%, significantly lower than the Tango study had shown in early June. And the comorbidities were old age, obesity, low GFR, cardiovascular disease, etc. So we decided to continue transplant, considering that their chance of getting COVID infection because of regular visit to the hospital on dialysis is high, and their death percentage is also high. This is 2019. We are a large transplanting unit. We cater to whole of Eastern India, including the Northeast and neighboring SAARC countries like Bangladesh, Bhutan, and even Myanmar. So normally we do around 40 to 50 transplant every month. If you see in October, we had done 28. That's the Durga Puja month for Bengal. Now in 2021, the blue color is 2020 and the orange is 2021. We stopped from last week of March because of the lockdown, the transplantation. So March transplantation was less, 33. We didn't do any transplantation in April and May. Then slowly started, we had a lot of waiting patients who were dying on dialysis. So we had to start transplantation in June. We did 16 patients in June. It came down to 6 in July, 2 in August, September 16. Then gradually it climbed, and you started doing around 40 to 50 patients per month. In March and April, we did 47 and 50 patients. And then when May, the second wave came, so it dropped down to 34, and this is 11 till 12th of June. So it has come down this month also. So it is slightly coming down, but we have not stopped transplantation except for the month of April and May, when we didn't know what is COVID and what will happen to our patients. What precautions we take for these patients? The pre-transplant precautions, we advise or even arrange their vaccination at least one dose 2 weeks prior to the transplant. So we advise vaccination if it is possible. Vaccination has only recently started, so majority of our patients who have been transplanted have not received vaccine. And if possible, even one vaccine we advise, but we normally wait a couple of weeks post-vaccination to do the transplant. And we advise them to isolate themselves 2 weeks prior to the transplant. Both and donor and recipient are admitted relatively early. We normally admit 2 days prior to transplant, but in COVID pandemic time, we are admitting them 5 to 7 days prior to transplant. And we check their RT-PCR before admission. If it is negative, then only we admit. We take both nasal and throat swabs. And we repeat RT-PCR very close to the transplantation, usually 2 days, 48 hours, but up to 72 hours. And if it is negative, then we take up for transplantation. We do chest X-rays of all our donor and recipient. We do not do routinely CT scan. It is not advised. There are problems with doing CT scans. Only when there is a chest symptom or there is some doubt, we do a CT scan of chest. For during this COVID period, we have actually developed a good COVID good transplant unit. We have dedicated staff who do not work anywhere else. Even if there is no COVID, no transplantation, like in April, May, we advise them to stay at home, not to work in any other ward, especially COVID wards. We have dedicated resident doctors. Those doctors do not go to see other patients in other wards. They are only meant for the transplant patients, and they stay inside the transplant unit. We have given them the room. Whenever they have to stay overnight, they stay there. And so they don't mix with other doctors. The staff and doctors by now all have been vaccinated. We brought dedicated ultrasound and X-ray machine, so it is not taken from the X-ray unit or radiology unit. We had got it stationed in the transplant unit. And of course, all the people who enter, like the consultants, we minimize entrance of the people. We do not allow, in fact, relatives to go to the transplant unit unless the patient is serious and we have to show them. And all the people who go, they use protective clothing. Patients who have recovered from COVID, both donor and recipient. For donor, the American Society of Transplantation, UNOS and OPTN guidelines are there. At least there should be 4 weeks, they should wait for 4 weeks after being symptom free. We also follow that. We only accept the patient once they are symptom free for 4 weeks, and they should be COVID negative before getting admitted. Normally, we test twice for COVID negativity in patients who have suffered from COVID infection. Before admission and post admission, we also test once. For recipients, actually there is no guideline from any society about how much time you should take to transplant them. AST suggests that you should wait till the patient is symptom free and at least 2 RT-PCRs are negative. We wait like donors for 4 weeks after their symptom resolution and then test for RT-PCR if they are negative, and if chest-wise they are fine, we admit them for transplantation. Post-transplantation, we normally go for online consultation and follow-up. We do not reduce our days of consultation. Normally in first month, we see the patient thrice a week. We continue to do so, but mostly online. And whenever online is not possible, wherever the online is not possible, we ask the relative to come with the investigation report to us. And so rarely we see the patient directly unless there is some problem and we have to see them. We also arrange from the hospital the sample collection from home so that they don't have to come and stand in queue for giving samples for blood testings. All our patients receive induction therapy. So we advise COVID vaccination after 3 months of transplantation. We don't advise immediate COVID vaccination post-transplantation. Even somebody who has taken first vaccine, we advise them to wait for 3 months because they get either T cell depleting hemoglobin or even B cell depleting, because we do good number of ABO incompatible transplant. Rituximab we give. So we advise them to wait for 3 months before taking vaccination. In transplantation during COVID era, from March last week 2020 to 12th June, we had total 393 transplant. I believe this will be the highest in the country at least. And out of 393, 24 were ABO incompatible transplant. We had HLA sensitized patients, 7 who were desensitized and transplanted. We had 3 cadaveric digit donor transplant. We had simultaneous liver kidney transplant 1. We had 14 re-transplantations. 12 of them are second transplant and 2 of them are third transplants. And we had total death 5 till now. Mean around 5 months. So the death is 1.3%. In fact, this is less than the earlier year when there was no COVID. So we don't restrict any kind of transplantation. We do continue to do all transplantation. And we do desensitize. We use rituximab besides thymoglobulin in these patients. So we don't compromise in our induction therapy or desensitization therapy. This is again a paper published in transplantation by Kute, and we all were contributors. There are 22 centers. It's a retrospective cohort study. 75 recipients recovered, they got transplantation, and the outcome was 100%. The rejection was only 6.6%. Most of these recovered patients had mild to asymptomatic COVID, but around 30 had moderate to severe COVID, so they have been doing well. So this is a study up to 80 days. So in 80 days or early post-transplant, we didn't have problem according to this paper. And this is a pan-India paper from 22 centers. We have also a pan-India paper publication in transplantation by Kute and all of us, which took 31 kidney transplant from 19 centers. Our center was a contributor. and we didn't face any problem. The outcome 100% success rate in the graft survival, and in the recipient there was 6.6% rejection. In our 393 patients, we had 73 patients who have been transplanted, who have recovered from COVID and have been transplanted. 24 donors who have recovered and have donated kidney. 19 of these 73 are donor kidney pairs who had recovered and have been transplanted. And post-transplant, till now, we had 6 COVID infection in very initial stage before they got discharged. So we had 6 COVID infection post-transplant out of 393. If I describe this 73 COVID recovered transplant, most of them were between 20 to 60 years, 40 around 40 to 60 years, and around 30, 20 to 40 years. And the comorbidities were diabetes and hypertension, significant comorbidities. Most of them had mild or they were asymptomatic. 15 had moderate symptoms and 10 had severe symptoms. This is the time period before COVID negative, and from the time of COVID to the transplantation. Around 42 were transplanted between 30 to 60 days after COVID infection. 14 were transplanted after 2 to 3 months of COVID infection, and 17 beyond 3 months of COVID infection. So they had to wait because they probably had more lung problem. In these COVID recovered patients whom we transplanted, we gave immunosuppression as we give to the normal patient. We didn't make any change. We gave 70 of them got anti-thymocyte globulin. R-ATG got 66 and grapholin 4. Basiliximab, 3 of them got, who had very bad lungs actually, and got basiliximab, and 4 ABOI got rituximab. The intraoperative urine output is 69, around 95%, and 4 had delayed graft function. And the immunosuppressives were CNI, antimetabolites, and steroid as we normally use. The average days of surgery to discharge was around 11.5 days, and average creatinine was 1.636 milligram%. There are certain special cases I will mention. One patient who had been transplanted by us 2011, recently around a year back, he had graft failure, was on dialysis, and we got a disease donor. Actually, it's a circulatory death donor. It's a senior doctor who had road traffic accident, and also before we could take the kidney, he had cardiac arrest, so kind of circulatory death. And on the table we biopsied, it had the pigment nephropathy in the kidney, but we used the kidney because pigment nephropathy, there is a chance of recovery. And he had ATN, but he gradually recovered, and now the creatinine is around 1.5. We discharged at 2.35. We had 3 patients who had very severe lung involvement. They took time to go for transplantation, more than 3 months, because of they required nighttime BiPAPs. They required a lot of pulmonology consultation, and gradually improved. And then we could do the transplant. They were on antifibrotics. All of them have been discharged successfully with normal renal function. But 2 of them gave us a lot of problem post-transplant requiring aggressive medical management. 4 of the patients who had recovered from COVID had APO incompatible transplant. They received rituximab, plasmapheresis, and IVIG as per our protocol. 2 of the post-COVID patients who had moderate to severe COVID got re-intubated because of CO2 retention post-surgery. After extubation, they got re-intubated. But again, in a couple of days, we could extubate them, and they went home with good kidney function. This is what Dr. Garima was telling. This is the first in India and probably in the world. I have not seen any other report. In 1st of July, we did a mother and son duo who had come from Bangladesh. for transplant because they got delayed because of the COVID. And in June, when we started transplanting, we found that they're asymptomatic, but both of them were COVID positive. Waited for 4 weeks, they became COVID negative, and then we did the transplant. And it is now nearing 1 year, they are doing well. We had 6 patients who had COVID infection post-transplant, immediate post-transplant within the days. Usually we discharge 10 to 12 days, so within those time. And these 6 patients were non-COVID patients. They were non-COVID patients. They were transplanted and they got COVID infection over a period of now more than a year, from June to June, around a year. 5 of them had moderate lung involvement. The CT score was 11, 12 by 25, and they required support of CPAP. None of them required intubation. One of them required intubation. They were managed with IV steroid, remdesivir, and supplemental oxygen. Because it was immediate post-transplant, we didn't use any monoclonal antibody. Normally, it is not advised to use them immediate post-transplant, at least 3 months post-transplant. 4 of them got discharged and they are fine. 2 patients died out of these 6 patients. And beyond this, in last 8 months, we have seen the freshly transplanted patients. 12 of them had COVID infection after discharge, after some days or months. Out of 12, 8 required hospital admission. 11 of them out of 12, 11 recovered, and we had 1 death. So total death, 2 immediate post-transplant, 1 death later on. A total death out of for COVID were 3. So I'll end here with the take-home message that considering COVID-19 infection and death rate are on dialysis to be very high, it is prudent to transplant these deserving patients. It is safe to transplant kidney in COVID recovered recipients, and it is also safe to take kidney from the COVID recovered donors. There is probably no need to modify the immunosuppressants. You should be giving the immunosuppressive which you are comfortable with. The mortality does not increase in kidney allograft recipients in a shorter length. The COVID-related precautions we took actually reduced the mortality because it reduced the severity of other bacterial and other viral infection or even fungal infection. So in fact, the mortality is less than the earlier years where there was no COVID. We had 3 COVID mortality, that is right, but total mortality was less. Thank you for a patient hearing.
Thank you very much, sir, for that wonderful talk and for sharing your data as well as clinical pearls with us. And as you rightly said, India has been through a bad first wave and a devastating second wave of COVID. But going by the reports we are seeing in China and UK, it's pretty obvious that COVID is here to stay. And it's about time that clinical teams adapt and learn to coexist with COVID. You've also pointed out about how transplantation is certainly better for the SRD population than waiting. So the issue is, and I've heard this from patients, and we know that it's not just the patients who are apprehensive, it's also the treating teams and the transplant teams that parts of the country maybe have in smaller volumes. So certainly today, sir, we have a lot of questions with you.
Yeah,
So I'd like, sir, to start with the big question of COVID-19 risk. I know you pointed out that of all the patients you transplanted during this period, only like 11% got COVID-19. First is I want to ask you, was there a difference in the first wave occurrence of infectivity of COVID in your transplant patient versus the second wave that came now because it was more severe and more infective?
If you go by death rate, it was similar, but the infection definitely, especially in our dialysis patients, the severity and number of infection has been worse in the second wave, actually, the last wave in May, June. This was really bad. In fact, we had more COVID infection post-transplant in a shorter period of 5 months than the whole of 2020. So it was bad.
Okay. So you did notice that even both waves together, the infectivity rate in India at your center in the dialysis was more than the transplant. You feel that
Yes, yes.
those who underwent transplant.
That's very reasonable because they come thrice a week to the dialysis. They have the comorbidities. Extra comorbidities, the renal failure, significant renal failure itself is a comorbidity. So
Yeah.
they are likely to have the COVID infection and they are likely to have serious infection.
Right, right. Also, did you experience that the COVID-19 risk in the post-transplant, even though it was certainly lower, was it more to do with the timing of the transplantation, as in those who, I'm talking about those who were even transplanted before COVID? Was there a difference in the risk of those, say, who were 1 year post-transplant versus those who were immediately transplanted?
Interestingly, this is not only our observation, this is observation amongst number of centers. We had a publication, as you know, in transplantation.
Right.
Uh, Most of the patients who had COVID infection, they were transplanted at least 5 years back.
Oh,
They were on low immunosuppression. Probably they were little more negligent. I don't know. That
right.
could be the reason. Because we didn't have much of fresh transplanted patient having COVID infection. We had more of old transplant patients having COVID infection. And that's the feeling with number of nephrologists who work on transplantation.
Right, right. That's very reassuring to know that, because that's the big fear that patients come with of the fear of developing COVID. So, also, I know you had very few patients who had COVID infection post transplant. Even in them, was there like more towards when we give them heavy immunosuppression and induction? Was it more in the admission that they got COVID, or not really? There was no trend towards any timing.
Difficult to say from where. See, we had two COVID negative.
Right. Okay.
Even though the RT-PCR is positive in 70%, but two negative we consider probably it is real negative. And they do come across, see, at least in pre-transplant area, they do come across with other nurses and other patients, kind of, and other people. So from somewhere they must have got the COVID infection and they were negative pre-transplant. This must have been fresh infection, so which has happened just
Right.
post-transplant in 5-7 days time. So,
Right.
so one need to be more careful also in pre-transplant area. We are careful in post-transplant. It's very difficult. You have space crunch. You have other COVID patients to be taken care of. Probably that is the area one should look at, pre-transplant area.
Right, right, that's true. And this is a question that's often asked, and so for the benefit of our audience, I will ask you again, sir. Are any reports of COVID being transmitted through the transplant organ? Because patients
There
are
is
also,
a
or
single
blood products.
there is a single report that a lung transplant has happened because of the disease donor had COVID in the lung. There is a single case report. There is no case report about any other organ transplant which has given the COVID infection because of the blood or because of the organ.
Right, right. And I extensively searched for it too. So maybe unpublished data also, but we haven't heard,
No,
right, sir?
I didn't get anywhere in that.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Now, coming to, like, of course, the infection risk we have discussed, coming to the timing of transplantation. And I know you like hit it out of the park straight away and said that, you've done most of your transplants after 4 weeks of them being asymptomatic. There was some guideline by anesthesia societies where they said, asymptomatic, so 4 weeks, and severe, so 12 weeks. Did you like categorize them like that, or is there a need you feel where we should first look at how severe was their COVID before we take them for transplant if they've
We,
had a previous COVID?
we fight with anesthetist.
Yeah, of course, always.
Honestly, if the infection had been serious,
Right.
some of our patients, you cannot do transplant even early because you
Mhm.
want their lung function to improve adequately so that they can come out of anesthesia. You don't want a kind of any difficult problem post transplant. So
Right.
automatically they will get delayed because of the clinical reason. For non-clinical reason, just for theory sake, we do not agree to this kind of advice. Nowadays, earlier when I did the transplant in July, there was no such actually guideline. Now that
Right.
the International Society of Heart and Lung Transplant has come out with guidelines. The AST has come out with guidelines. So the NOTO has come out with guidelines, though NOTO period is little longer. But there are guidelines available. And now a lot of nephrologists have the experience of doing the transplant. So this very experience of ours or some other centers can also taken into account, can be taken.
Certainly, sir. And as your data proves that, the timing, we of course wait for the patient to be fit, as you said. So coming to that, now I know there are some patients who are COVID positive, and then we can do all this. But there's a lot of patients also who come and say, we had contact with COVID, we didn't have symptoms, we were never tested. So would there be a waiting period, or we just follow the protocol of like testing them, admitting them, testing them, and
They
go
have
ahead like
a
that?
contact or they had some COVID symptom but they never tested, we wait for at least 2 weeks.
Okay. And
So
then we will tell them that we will come and give them a timing for transplant. Okay. Since we're talking about timing, and I'm going to be discussing vaccination later with you, but generally, I know you mentioned that you insist that all of your patients get vaccination 2 weeks before, even if they are not. But is there such a period, like say a patient is already vaccinated, got one dose or two doses, is there a period you would wait before you take them for transplant, or
no, I
it's
think
okay?
I think the recommendation. This is the recommendation I am saying. The recommendation is you wait for 2 weeks time. There is no
Right.
recommendation that you should wait for a couple of months or so.
Right.
Even if they have had two vaccines or even if they had one vaccine, if
Right.
they are to be transplanted, you can transplant after a couple of weeks because probably uh, rarely vaccines can have certain side effect. You need to look into that. That is the reason you should not have a post-transplant thrombosis because of the vaccination.
Right.
So that is why probably this recommendation is there. And we
Okay.
do the same thing. We if they have to take a vaccine, they take probable 2 weeks prior to the probable date of transplantation.
Okay. Okay.
But only thing that post-transplant, if you are not using T cell depleting agents like thymoglobulin or not using rituximab, you can advise vaccine after a month. But if you are using this, at least 3 months should go. Otherwise, the vaccine will not work. As it is in post-transplant patients, as you know, the vaccines doesn't protect you like normal population. It
Right.
50%, around 50%, and more so if somebody is on mycophenolate.
Right. Okay. So while we discuss timing, the other issue that comes to us is an ideal patient. Like I know that you your data is remarkable in that sense that you've done 24 ABO incompatible in this period, and seven highly sensitized recipients. But so like for say centers who are just starting up, is there like personally you feel is there a patient that you should or should not take during this period, or maybe if it's highly sensitized right now, infectivity rate is high, so avoid it, or you don't think that any of this made much of a difference, whether it
As
was
you
sensitized or
know,
not?
Dr. Garima, APOI is relatively less sensitized. APOI is relatively a easier option than HLA sensitization. HLA sensitization is really tough. It takes
Right,
days, it takes multiple plasmapheresis, it takes lot of IVIG, and at times you get actually vexed because it is not clearing out,
right,
and they have to stay for a longer period in the hospital. So if you have problem of resources and if you have problem of experience, then probably this time HLA desensitization you may not do because
right,
of the issues. But APO is, to my mind, is a reasonably easier way to do. So one should not
right.
worry about APO incompatible transplant.
Right, right. And going by just the normal transplant patients who are not sensitized, immunological risk being low, but since you said diabetes and obesity and hypertension, we know are more at risk of COVID. Is there a selection process you recommend for this, or just like,
So all our dialysis patient will have something or other.
yeah, that's what I think they have all the risk factors. That's true,
80
yeah.
90% will have hypertension, 50% will have diabetes. So you can't do without them.
Right, right. Okay, so then coming to like we've discussed the timing. Now, I know I noticed that you mentioned a lot of your protocols. So there's a thing that we are facing is that a lot of patients are scared to even come for the transplant workup. Like, because that's a long process and the patients keep coming to the hospital for this department, that department. So is there like a concise protocol or something that you have established, or you recommend that, do most of it online and do all the tests together or something, just to guide, other centers as to, okay, pre-transplant workup, how to make it shortest possible?
See, all my patients, first time I have to see because I have to interview, I have to find out who is the donor, who is all those you have to. There are legal issues, there are
Right.
medical issues, so you have to at least see them once or twice initially, and there are interviews, there are video recordings. You know,
Right.
all this has
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
light in that, and usually I write a test in two steps, so they don't have to come frequently. One normal test, and second time it is HLAs and CT scans, angiograms and all that. So
Right.
they don't have to come that frequently to the hospital. You should minimize their coming by giving tests at one go. At the same time, you should see that if by chance it is cancelled, they should not lose a lot of money also.
Right, right.
As a doctor, you have to also see their
Yes,
finances
yes,
and
sir.
all that.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you have to make a balance of this. Uh,
Right,
and once or twice you have seen, then if somebody of one of his relatives comes and shows you, that is fine with us.
right. Okay. So that's for the pre-transplant. But when they get admitted, I noticed you mentioned that you are admitting them -7, like for 7 days they're in the hospital and you're doing two COVID tests. And usually transplant centers admit 1 or 2 days prior. Is this a modified protocol that you instituted
Yeah,
because of COVID?
we have modified it 7 or at least 5 days, because if they have come with a COVID infection and COVID is negative that day, in 5 days time we'll know that whether he has a fever or not.
Right.
So that is the
Absolutely.
reason, sole reason. There is a logic about it. So that's the reason why we try to admit them earlier.
And of course, like, so the COVID testing is done once they get admitted, and after COVID testing, they're not going, they're admitted. So that gives an additional layer of protection. So
Yes.
I also noticed that you said that you are only doing a COVID RT-PCR for your patients, and a lot of centers and there are studies to say that a CT is also an additional layer, and anesthesia sometimes insists. Do you have any recommendation for centers who are doing who, or should they go ahead with a CT as well?
We don't do the CT. There are two reasons for this. One, if there is a requirement clinically, you do a CT, no doubt about it. But if
Right.
there is no requirement, if chest is fine, chest X-ray is fine. If you do a CT in any kind of ESRT patient, there will be some lung involvement. That's very normal. You
Right.
say uremic lung or this, whatever, you will find little bit of involvement. And you can face the problem with from anesthetist because of that involvement.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you have to overcome that the kind of problem, and then if you think of cost, it also costs money. So
Absolutely.
and if you go by recommendation, no society recommends a compulsory CT.
Yeah.
It's only individuals who do it. I am not in favor of that.
Right, right. And very good practical points. Actually, every time I do a CT for a pre-transplant, anesthesia stops the transplant for, there's
Yeah,
some
there you just
suspicion of pneumonia or something. So, yeah, very good practical point. I also, so you mentioned that you could, keep X-ray and CT machine, like ultrasound machines for your patients, but many centers don't have that, don't have the facilities and the monetary support. So is there any, like, you recommend, like, okay, do the testing less or do it at another time, because we are forced to do ultrasounds on our patients and check X-rays even post transplant many times.
see post transplant X-ray you have to do even if it's
Yeah,
normal.
yeah,
Ultrasound also, at least one check ultrasound you have to do. You have to impress on, if not purely for unit, at least in the non-COVID area, you should have ultrasound and X-ray separate than for the COVID area. So you have to. I believe in these times, if you're doing a reasonable number of transplant, the corporates, the hospital authorities, administrator will listen to you. Otherwise, you
yes.
can't do a transplant.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, it's about also asking for it. So it was a good
Yeah,
point that you mentioned that
exactly.
you,
You can do that. In that case, whoever brings the CT or X-ray machine, you have to actually clean those machines, and you have to see that the people who are carrying the machine are properly, protection gears, this, that, everything is done. In those situations, one can do that, but it is always easier if you have the ultrasound and X-ray machine in your transplant unit.
Right, right. So, you mentioned that your protocols for like testing also and immunosuppression, which I'm going to come to now. But is there any role of testing antibodies according to you, sir? Like, some patients come, you see my antibodies immune. Do you think there's any role of even post-transplant or
Not advise.
pre-transplant?
No, nobody advises that.
Right.
We are doing some studies, but only for study purpose.
It doesn't decrease or increase the risk if they are immune or not immune. Why
Because
we
you
go for
don't
the
know what
process?
kind of antibody. You just want a IgG antibody, you want a spike protein, there are so
Right.
many issues involved in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to encourage that kind of practice is only very good.
There are some studies, very new study. It has not been published probably, and that since the vaccines gives less immunity to transplant recipients, they can go for a third vaccine.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. This was recently published in the American. Absolutely, and their antibodies may be a little less.
probably the government has to consider about this because of immunosuppressed patients who are on immunosuppression
Right.
can probably give a third vaccine.
Okay. So coming to immunosuppression now, I know you don't change the immunosuppression when in transplants in the COVID era. You haven't changed it for your patients, but there is studies, and this is just something for the audience. Like you don't recommend that MMF since that's the one that's known, or any protocol should be changed, right? When we go ahead to transplant in this era.
No, we don't. We don't change any kind of unless there need to be changed because of other reasons. But
Right.
just because pandemic, we don't change. There are very few people who advise withdrawing anti-metabolites MMFs for vaccination for few
Right.
years. But normally, generally, it is not recommended because you should not land in acute rejection. The problem is, long back when there was no direct antiviral therapy, DA was not there, and we were doing hepatitis C transplants because they have more chance of infection. We are not using induction therapy, and we are using cyclosporin because that has some antiviral role than
Right.
tacrolimus, and that is
Right.
less immunosuppressive. But we found that we finally landed in giving more immunosuppressant because of the rejection.
Injection. Yeah.
So we changed our practice. So that is how this is this time also.
Right.
You can't go for
Don't,
rejection.
yeah, don't interfere with a good thing. And that was actually my second question because, like you said, cyclosporin in that era, and now there's a lot of talk about mTORs, sirolimus, and all being somewhat antiviral, and whether they could be used as immunosuppression or switch over after a few months to them. Would you recommend any such practice?
I don't think for COVID you can do that. We don't do that. But
Right,
for other regions, if you want to switch over, a lot of people switch over to mTOR inhibitor or minimize CNIs and add on mTOR inhibitor. That can be done because of your practice. Only
right,
for COVID, I don't think you should be doing that. Even though there are some reports that mTOR inhibitors have antiviral effect, there are also reports that mTOR inhibitor can suppress your immunity to vaccine. You don't
right,
get
right.
like mycophenolate. So normally you don't have to change.
Okay,
Especially if somebody comes with a COVID infection, you don't want to play around with immunosuppression too much because you have an infection,
right,
then you don't want a rejection.
right, right. Okay, enough about pre-transplant. Now coming to a little bit about post-transplant in the few minutes that we have before we take audience questions, and we are getting a lot of audience questions, I may inform you. So just wanted to ask, so say a post-transplant patient gets COVID. What's the change in the transplant immunosuppression that you recommend? Are you stopping MMF or any of the other?
I stopped the mycophenolate.
Okay,
And depending on their situation, we may increase the steroid. We may not. If it is mild, we may not increase the steroid.
right,
If it is severe and there are cytokine issues, then we can increase the steroid. We do give remdesivir to all our patients post transplant. and we don't give monoclonal antibodies like tocilizumab, etc. If they have been transplanted within 3 months, they have had COVID within 3 months of transplant. But if they are in long term, like last year, we had a lot of patients beyond 5 years. We have
Right.
tried tocilizumab in some of them. So they
Okay.
are old transplant patients, you can try. But for the initial 3 months, you should not. That's the recommendation also. We don't give.
Right, right, right. And what about hospitalization? If a post-transplant patient gets COVID, do you recommend all of them get hospitalized?
If the COVID, the infection itself require hospitalization, yes, not a compulsory for everybody.
Right, right. This is a very important point practically, sir, because a lot of patients come and they get very anxious. I'm a post-transplant, I've got COVID, admit me. So it's important to know that they don't require hospitalization unless the COVID is severe.
You just
What
ask,
about the yes, sir.
just ask them to buy a pulse oximeter.
Yes, yes, sir. We are going to give a disclaimer now today, sir, about that. What about the new monoclonal antibodies, sir? For preventing severe COVID infection. Now that it's available, would you recommend that all transplant patients who get diagnosed?
This is still in trial phase, I believe. I
I
don't
mean, there's no transplant
think
data, but it started being available.
monoclonal antibodies you cannot give within 3 months of transplantation.
Right,
Beyond that, this is in a trial phase. I don't have any personal experience.
right,
I
right,
have only used tocilizumab in old transplant patients. I have not also used bericitinib, which is giving a good result in some of the COVID severe infections.
right, right,
Tablet form it is now probably available in India also, but I don't have any experience. We have never
right,
used.
right, right. So, just I'm going to conclude quick because we're getting a lot of requests for questions, which we are going to take. But just one more thing, what I personally wanted us to you to enlighten us on is a lot of patients are worried about black fungus, mucormycosis, and I've had patients tell me, "Oh, you are putting me on steroids," and in the news it said that steroids are causing mucormycosis. Have you seen a higher incidence of mucormycosis or any incidence of mucormycosis?
As nephrologist or transplant physician, you must have faced mucormycosis, but that's very unusual, very, very unusual.
Very rare, yes.
This is not a very common fungus. Aspergillosis is a common fungus, or Candida is a common fungus.
Right.
In last pandemic, we had two mucormycosis. One in a dialysis patient with COVID infection, and he actually succumbed and severe mucormycosis, and not a transplant patient. And one post-transplant, not COVID infection, it's just a mucormycosis, and he survived with surgery and amputation.
Okay. Okay.
So it's not common; it's uncommon.
Yeah, and uncommon
In my
still,
practice,
despite the high immunosuppression they sometimes receive.
yeah, when people talk of steroids, see, we use so much of steroid in our patients, long-term low-dose steroid probably, but we don't see that many mucormycosis. There should
Right,
be some
right,
other reason.
right. Definitely, other factors are contributing. Coming to more for our patient audience, like while they're waiting for a transplant on the waiting list, ESRD patients, is there any specific precautions that you advise to your ESRD dialysis patients? Before going for a transplant, lifestyle or behavioral precautions.
I think all COVID related behavior, proper behavior for COVID, there should be.
Absolutely.
And not only that, even the post-transplant patients who had vaccines, since we know the vaccine may not work as well as in non-transplant patients, non-immunosuppressed patients, they should also use mask, distancing, and hand washing. These
Right.
three should be used by everybody.
Right, right. Very important point about vaccination, sir. And just for clarifying to the audience, for these patients, dialysis or post-transplant, is there a choice of vaccine that you would recommend? Covaxin, Covishield, Sputnik. According to you, is there any preference?
All are in our country, all are same, whatever is available.
Right.
Only thing that at the present age, if you want to go abroad, then you should take Covishield or Pfizer or something which is recognized.
Right. WHO has still not recognized Covaxin. So yes. So, but the effectivity is pretty much the same, and the only thing is maybe
Yeah,
any of these might be required. Right.
if it is possible.
Right. Right. So we are now going to take some of the audience questions. We have had a very comprehensive chat. Let's take the questions that we haven't covered. And to all the audience members, I would request that even if your questions we are not able to cover, we'll send you a link or email address on which you can email your questions, and then Dr. Ray would be kind enough to answer them for you. So let's take some of these questions. So one of the questions that we have is there some extra care and precautions required for a patient transplanted during COVID-19 times at hospital or at home? Just
I think the care we take for normal transplantation in non-COVID time is good enough. Except that you should avoid crowd. You should avoid distance. You should keep a distance. Like 2 3 things which we all know. Besides
right.
that, nothing extra has to be taken. You don't have to come to hospital very frequently. If your doctor can give you advice online, it is better to go for online advice.
Okay, one more question, which you have clarified, but I think Dr. Roy, after transplant surgery, if patient develops COVID immediately after his transplant, will immunosuppressive drug and the immunosuppressive drugs are reduced immediately after transplant as well? Does that affect the transplant function in the immediate post-transplant period? Is what they're interested in.
We don't normally reduce the immunosuppressive except for the mycophenolate, which is a lesser immunosuppressive drug.
Right.
And in exchange, we may have to increase the steroid depending on the IL-6 and D-dimer, etc. value. So normally they don't get into rejection. If you stop other medicine like CNI, if you stop, then there may be a problem. So we don't
Right.
normally stop CNI. Besides, the CNI has some anti-IL-6, IL-1 action. So,
Right.
so that may be helpful in COVID infection.
Okay. And this is a very practical question by Garima Upadhyay, who asks that how many days do you admit the patients post transplant in the COVID era? Like I think she means like nowadays, is it a longer period of admission for transplant
No,
patients
no.
as
Normally, 7 to 8 days we keep the patient. If they are
right?
fine, we discharge in 8 days. If they have problem, then we keep for a longer period.
Well, you've discussed this already, but Anupam Roy Chaudhary asked, do tacrolimus and immunosuppressant doses for patients transplanted during COVID-19 differ from that in normal times? Is there a change in the potency, which I think we covered, but I think they're referring to
There is
tacrolimus.
a change in dose. So whatever dose we normally is required, we give that dose. So we don't change the dose. Actually.
And for the benefit of the audience, even the TAC level targets don't really change, right? So even in the COVID-19 era, we would remain the same TAC level targets. Um, COVID-19. So I think a lot of questions about can they be on home care if a patient who's transplanted and gets COVID. I think you already clarified it. It's
Yeah, if it is
based.
mild, there can be home care. We don't advise everybody to be admitted
Yeah,
unless
yeah.
they require oxygen therapy. So probably they don't need the admission.
Uh, Under what medical circumstances should a patient opt to get transplanted during COVID-19, knowing the risks involved? Is it not wise to wait?
I think the only thing comes to my mind, suppose you are planning a preemptive transplant. That means you are not on dialysis and your
Right.
kidney function is not too bad. You are able to manage, and there is a height of COVID like we had in May, June, April, May. You may wait for a month or two. Otherwise, there is no need of wait.
Okay.
As I said, the prognosis will be bad during on dialysis. So that way, it is better to get transplant.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as you pointed out, there have been studies also saying waiting list patients seem to have higher mortality. And you also pointed out that the dialysis patients seem to have a higher risk of infection. So might as well go ahead with the transplant. This is for the audience. I'm looking at questions which we haven't covered during the chat. I think we've covered everything that they've been asked, but I would encourage the audience to please post your questions and we will post a reply or we will refer the questions to Dr. Ray and get back to you with the answers that you need. Thank you, sir, for this very, very interesting chat for me personally and for the audience. Looking at the number of questions we are getting, I'm sure everyone thoroughly enjoyed it. I would like to thank you for sharing your data with us and your insights and your experience. I'd also like to thank Biocon Biologics for supporting this informative event. Hope they continue with such endeavors and hope they continue to call us to learn from them. Thanks to the Week magazine for their digital and print media support by helping the message reach out far and wide. Before I conclude completely, sir, I'd like you to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you. Garima, it has been always a pleasure to talk to you, and you moderate so well. I think you should go moderate in national level. We have to do something about it. Really good and really appreciable, and
Thank you, sir.
all the best for your future. I also thank the Bicon for this, and so also the Week magazine and Rajiv Jha especially. And thank you very much again.
Thank you, sir. And you already mentioned last, but never the least, Mr. Rajiv Jha. He's been instrumental in conceptualizing, realizing, pushing us, and supporting us during this entire endeavor. So, Mr. Rajiv Jha, thank you for thinking of this event. Hope you continue to have such ideas. And before we end, we have a treat for the audience. We have a video, so it's actually with you in it. It's you encouraging the transplant patients to go for yoga and lifestyle changes. And some of the points you make on why they should go for these kind of exercises, about how it's even safer now in COVID because it reduces their risk of exposure to the outside world. So we end now with this video by Dr. Ray encouraging his transplant patients to practice yoga. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chronic diseases have become a major cause of global morbidity and mortality even in the developing countries. The most common cause of chronic kidney disease in population-based studies is diabetic nephropathy. India has evolved in kidney transplantation over 45 years and currently is the second largest program after the United States. The success rate in today's date is immense, with 80 to 85% at 5 years of transplant.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Morning. How are you?
Shweta, a 33-year-old housewife, underwent a kidney transplant surgery.
This should be fine.
Sir, under your guidance, I have to be fine.
That's nice. The reports are good, still good. So now it is around 1 month, nearing 1 month.
Nearing 1 month.
See, Shweta, we have started kind of yoga training for our post-transplant patients. Why? Because you need to have a regular exercise, and number of occasions you cannot go out because of the heat, because of the dust, because of the rain, and this is something which can be personalized. What I'll do is I'll take you out and you just wait outside. Another girl is coming of same as yours. So we had a third transplant. This is third time. And then both of you can come with me. I'll show you how it is being done.
Sudipta, a 30-year-old school teacher, underwent the third kidney transplant. Yoga is the cessation of the changing modes of Chitta consciousness. The term yoga is derived from Sanskrit meaning to join together. It is a unique invention by the sages of ancient India to unite the mind, body and soul. Yoga is not a religion, it is a practice.
যখন আমি যোগার ক্লাসে আসি তখন এদের মধ্যে প্রথম দেখি খুব একটা আড়ষ্ট ভাব, খুব ডিপ্রেশন, কি হবে এরপরে, কি আমরা কি আদৌ সুস্থ হব না সারা জীবনে এইভাবে থেকে যাব। এইখান থেকে এদেরকে অনেকটা আমার মনে হয় অনেকটা আমি রিলিফ করতে পেরেছি, কারণ ব্রিদিং এক্সারসাইজ, কিছু জয়েন্টস মুভমেন্টস, কিছু প্রাণায়াম, মেডিটেশন, এই ধরনের জিনিস দিয়ে এরা অনেকটা রিকভার করেছে। এরা যেটা আগে পারতো না, নিজেরা খুব শেকি ছিল বা খুব আড়ষ্ট ছিল, সেই ব্যাপারটা থেকে অনেকটা রিকভার করেছে এবং সবার সাথে খুব মিলিয়ে ঝুলিয়ে ওরা থাকতে পারছে, নিজেদের অনেক কথা নিজেরা শেয়ার করতে পারছে, এনার্জিটা বেড়েছে এদের অনেক।
Shweta and Sudipta converse with the patients going through the yoga regime post-transplant to learn about their experiences and the benefits of the same.
ক্লাসের মাধ্যমে আমাদের শরীরের যে ফিটনেস আমাদের দেখা করে যে আমরা অনেকদিন চালু হচ্ছে কাজ করতে চাই না।
We are a large nephrology unit in eastern part of India. We do good number of patients, we do transplantations. They come from different provinces of India. They come from neighboring SAARC countries, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar.
আগের থেকে যে বাসায় থাকতে যে মনের যে একটা ছিল সংকোচ ছিল এখানে আসার পর মোটামুটি সবার সাথে কথা বলার পর এবং যোগ ব্যায়ামটা কৰাৰ পর আৰু মনটা এবং ফ্ৰেছ।
মোৰ নাম বনানী গগৈ হয়, মই অসমৰ পৰা আহিছোঁ। ইয়াত কিডনি ট্ৰান্সপ্লাণ্টৰ কাৰণে আহিছিলোঁ আৰু মোৰ অক্টোবৰৰ 3 তাৰিখে কিডনি ট্ৰান্সপ্লাণ্ট হ'ল।
Post transplant, they stay here for 3 months. And initially, I used to tell them to take a daily walk on some form of exercise. But Kolkata being Kolkata, you have dust, you have heat, rain, monsoons. Most of the times they are not able to go out, do a...
कोई साधन नहीं, मैं योगा करूँगा। योगा करते करते मेरा पैर एकदम ब्लॉक जो था वो धीरे धीरे एकदम ठीक होने लगा। आज हम खड़ा हो सकते हैं।
So I thought I'll introduce yoga. Yoga because it can be done indoor and it can be catered to the patient's need, the person's need, how much he can do or not do.
योगा करने से तन मन संतुष्ट रहता है, दिन भर तरोताजगी महसूस करता हूँ।
So I started training them in yoga.
এই যে আমি 3-4 দিন আমি এক্সারসাইজ করতে আসছি, এক্সারসাইজ করার পর আরও মনটা আমার খুব ফ্রেশ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। কীভাবে দেখাচ্ছে স্যার সেই যে শিখছি, আমার যেন আরও শরীর সুস্থ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। যেটা যে আমি আজকে আর মনে হচ্ছে না কাজে যেতে পারবো। আগে যেটা আমি বুঝতে পারছিলাম যে কাজে যেতে পারবো না, হয়তো আমি বসে যাচ্ছি, কিন্তু যেভাবে আমাকে এক্সারসাইজ দেখাচ্ছে আমার মনের স্পিড আরও বেড়ে যাচ্ছে।
I told the patient, I arranged a trainer and they started attending the yoga. They came back to me, they said they are feeling better both physically as well as psychologically. Initially, I didn't have that trust of spirituality, the psychological benefit. I never thought about that. That's why I thought this is a very good way to, involve people. They form a group and they talk to each other. So they share their problems. At times, they are not able to talk to me about their problems, but through a group, they are able to convey, they are able to share their joys and sorrows. And when they go back, they also keep communicating with each other. I think that's the biggest point in a community yoga. That's what we need.
डॉक्टर S.Ray मुझको सजेस्ट किया है कि योगा करने के लिए, तो मैं आपके साथ कंसल्ट करने आई हूँ।
ठीक है, तो योगा क्लासेस मेरा 3 दिन है।
वीक में 3 डेज।
वीक में 3 डेज है, मंडे, वेडनेसडे और फ्राइडे, स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम 7:30। 1 आवर का है, 7:30 to 8।
1 आवर का है, 3 डेज 1 आवर में।
ठीक है, तो मैं आपको इन्फॉर्म कर देती हूँ।